I grew up in a small town in West Virginia. I won't name the university I went to, but it was a tiny school less than an hour from where I lived. Since I was broke and had no car at the time, I stayed in the dorms. Most students chose apartments off campus, but I wanted the full college experience, even if it meant being stuck in a nearly empty building. On move-in day, I met my roommate. We'd exchanged a few awkward texts beforehand since the school gave her my number, but meeting her in person was different. She was polite enough, though distant, and gave off this odd entitled vibe. The very first week, she offhandedly told me, "You know, I've had the whole room to myself until now." That comment stuck with me, though I laughed it off. She spent most of her weekdays with her boyfriend, rarely in the room. That first Friday, I told her I was going home for the weekend, like I planned every week. I'd leave Friday afternoon and return early Monday morning before classes. She didn't seem to care. That Monday, I came back around 6 a.m. and crawled into bed to grab a couple hours of sleep before lectures. About 10 minutes after lying down, I felt the edge of my mattress dip, as if someone had leaned against it. Still groggy, I didn't react right away. When the weight lifted, I turned my head. She was on her bed, facing the wall, motionless. I convinced myself it was in my head and went back to sleep. The following week, the same thing happened, but worse. I'd barely gotten comfortable when my mattress sank again, only this time much deeper, like someone was sitting right beside me. I froze. My lofted bed was high enough that I needed a stool to climb onto it, and I heard the soft thud of someone jumping back down. Terrified, I rolled over just enough to glimpse her. She was in bed again, turned away, seemingly asleep. Sleep paralysis? Hallucination? That's what I tried to tell myself. But the third time shattered that explanation. It was another Monday morning. I returned, tossed my bag down, and laid back. Minutes later, I felt the dip again. Only this time, the presence didn't just sit something cold, pressed against the back of my neck. A hand. It stayed there, firm but not squeezing, as if testing. My pulse roared in my ears. I stayed absolutely still, praying it would stop. After what felt like hours, the hand lifted. Whoever it was jumped off my bed. I didn't even look that time. I bolted, ran out of the dorm, and called my mom from outside. I skipped classes that day. She reported everything to housing, and thankfully, the school let me move to a different room immediately. That's when things started to click. My old roommate once mentioned a previous roommate who didn't last long. She also had a drawer crammed with prescription bottles. She claimed they were for skin problems, but I wasn't convinced. Side effects? Another disorder? Or something she was hiding? A few days after moving, I realized I had left some stuff behind, a binder and a novel. She texted me, insisting I come pick them up. Against my better judgment, I went. My key still worked, so I let myself in. The room was empty, and I quickly grabbed my things. Just as I turned to leave, the door swung open. She was standing there. I hadn't even heard her unlock it. She didn't move out of the doorway, just stared at me. I forced a smile and muttered a quick thanks. As I slipped past her, she asked, "Where's your new room?" I lied, saying it was on the first floor, near the stairwell. She pressed for Pacific's hall name, room number, what it was next to. I dodged every question and walked away as fast as I could. That was the last time I saw her. To this day, I don't know the truth. Maybe she was sleepwalking. Maybe the medications made her act strangely. Or maybe she was deliberately pushing boundaries, seeing how far she could go before I woke up planning something worse for the day. I didn't doubt my mom believed she was testing me, and that the morning I felt the hand on my neck. She might have been moments away from trying to choke me. I'll never know for sure, but I do know one thing. I'll never share a room with a stranger again. I went to university in a small northern town most people outside the state have never heard of. It wasn't a party school by any means. Our idea of nightlife was the one dive bar on Main Street, closing at midnight. Because of that, a lot of us spent our late nights on campus, either in the library or tucked away in the older, academic buildings that stayed open 24 hours. I wasn't the type to pull all-nighters. But in my last year, one class forced me into it. Advanced Statistics. The professor, Dr. Harker, was infamous for burying students under a mountain of projects. One of his biggest assignments was due at the end of the semester, and I was way behind. My laptop had been acting up for weeks, freezing every 10 minutes, so I figured I'd use the university's computers instead. The business building sat off to the side of campus, away from the main quad. It was 3 floors, built sometime in the late 70s, with those yellowed fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly. Even in the day it felt off, but at night it was worse, sterile, cold, and far too quiet. Still, a computer lab on the second floor was usually empty after 10, which made it the perfect place to work. That night, I swiped in just after 10:30. The door beeped, unlocked, and I stepped inside. Immediately, I noticed the temperature drop. It was much colder than outside. The air stank faintly of disinfectant, like the cleaning crew had already passed through. The silence pressed on me as I walked the empty hallway and slid into the computer lab. For the first hour, things were fine. The hum of the machine, the clicking of keys, it almost lulled me into forgetting how eerie the building felt. I kept glancing at the clock in the corner of the screen, telling myself I'd leave before 1 a.m. But close to midnight, the first thing happened. A door slammed somewhere in the building. Not the front entrance, but deeper inside, maybe down the hall. The sound was sharp, too deliberate to be an accident. My head snapped up, my heart skipping, but after a minute of silence, I convinced myself it was just the air system or a door not latched properly. Went back to my data sets. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing through the hall outside. Whoever it was wasn't trying to be quiet. My fingers froze above the keyboard. The steps stopped directly outside the lab door. I didn't dare move, didn't even breathe, just stared at the faint reflection of the room in my computer screen. The handle rattled. Not casually, not like someone checking if it was locked. Whoever was on the other side was shaking it, hard, over and over, like they wanted me to hear it. The lab doors automatically locked after a certain time. I knew that. Still, the sound of metal scraping made my stomach twist. After 30 seconds that felt like hours, the noise stopped. The footsteps moved on, fading into the distance. I sat frozen, debating. My project was due in the morning. Leaving now meant failure. Maybe it was just another student messing around. That's what I told myself. I forced my hands back to the keyboard. 5 minutes later, the sound came again. But this time, it wasn't footsteps in the hall. It was above me. The ceiling in that building was those flimsy drop tiles. Pipes sometimes groaned when the heat kicked on, but this wasn't that. This was the distinct weight of someone crawling slowly across the panels, directly over my head. I stared upward. One of the tiles sagged, shifting slightly, as if something or someone was pressing down on it. A long creak followed, like the sound of weight carefully shifting. That was it. I yanked out my flash drive, stuffed my notebook into my bag, and bolted. The second I stepped into the hallway, the silence pressed even harder. The lights buzzed faintly, flickering every so often. My footsteps squeaked against the tile as I moved as quickly as I could without outright sprinting. I shoved open the stairwell door, and that's when I made the mistake of looking up. On the landing above me, 1 floor up, stood a man. He wasn't a student. Wasn't a professor. His clothes were ragged, hanging off his frame, and his face was shadowed, but I could see his mouth. It hung open in this too-wide grin, teeth showing, as if he'd been waiting for me. He didn't move. He just stared. I ran. I barreled down the stairs so fast I nearly tripped, slammed through the first floor door, and sprinted for the front entrance. My ID card beeped just in time to unlock the door, and I shoved it open, bursting out into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I was back in my dorm, door locked, back pressed against it while my lungs burned. The next morning, I forced myself back to the business building to hand in the project. In the daylight, it looked so normal, almost harmless. But when I passed the lab, my stomach dropped. 2 of the ceiling tiles were missing, one directly above the seat where I had been working, and the one in the corner, the exact panel. I saw shift before I ran. I don't know what that man's plan was. Whether he had been hiding in the ceiling watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. All I know is if I'd stayed another 10 minutes, he wouldn't have had to just rattle the handle. I've never set foot in that building again, and I bought a new laptop the next week. My name is Annabelle. I'm from the UK, and this story goes back to when I was 16. Even now, years later, I struggle to tell it without shaking. It was the day I came closer than I ever want to again to being kidnapped. And the worst part is that it happened right in the middle of what should have been one of the safest places, my school. The school I attended was fairly new. Lots of glass walls, echoing corridors, and that clean, almost too sterile look. It was small in terms of students, but the building was huge because it also housed a nursery and a special school for kids with learning difficulties. So in reality, only a third of the building was actually ours. Because of this layout, security was a big deal. Anyone could walk into the foyer. That was open, but to go any further, you had to scan a lanyard with your ID badge. Every student had one. Your photo, your name, your year, it was all on display. The teachers warned us constantly not to let anyone in if we didn't recognize them. Even if they smiled, even if they said they forgot their card, we were told not to hold the door. At the time, I didn't take it too seriously. I thought it was one of those school rules meant to scare us into behaving. I couldn't have been more wrong. This was only my second full day at the school. I'd missed most of the first week because I was sick, so I was already feeling behind, out of place, still figuring out where everything was. That morning had been normal enough. Geography class, lunch in the cafeteria, chatting awkwardly with a few new people. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then, about half an hour after lunch, I felt it, the crushing, desperate need to use the bathroom. I had downed way too much juice at lunch, trying to finish it before the bell, since we weren't allowed drinks in class. It hit me like a freight train mid-lesson. Normally, teachers hated letting people out. My geography teacher, especially, was strict about it. But I guess the look on my face said everything, because after some grumbling, he reluctantly waved me out. That small decision, him saying, "Fine, go quickly," is what put me in the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. The halls were silent as I left class. No one else was around. That's normal for lesson hours. I passed through the cafeteria on my way to the toilets, went, and then retraced my steps back. The cafeteria was big and empty, chairs stacked on tables, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Except this time, it wasn't empty. A man sat at one of the tables. I slowed down instinctively, my brain stuttering. He was too old to be a student, that much was clear. Maybe a teacher, maybe a parent waiting for someone. He had a lanyard on, which put me at ease for a second. That meant he belonged here, right? "Hey," he said suddenly. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Letting out a squeak, I instantly regretted. He chuckled lightly, raising his hands like he hadn't meant to scare me. Sorry about that. He sounded normal, friendly even. I felt silly for being so on edge. That's when he asked if I could help him for a minute. He said he had some things in his car he needed to carry inside. Just a couple bags. Wouldn't take long. My brain didn't even pause. He had a lanyard. He sounded official. I thought he was a teacher. I nodded quickly and said yes. We left the cafeteria, walked through the foyer, and out the glass doors into the front courtyard. It was a bright day, cold but sunny. That's when I noticed something off. He wasn't talking at all. Teachers always made small talk when walking with a student. Questions about your classes, where you lived, what subjects you liked. But he kept silent. Worse, his hands were restless. In his pockets, out again, clasping, rubbing, like he couldn't decide what to do with them. My gut started whispering that something wasn't right, but I was shy, awkward, and didn't know how to back out. So I kept walking. The car park at our school was tucked behind a line of bushes. You couldn't see it until you were practically inside it. It meant that for those few steps, we were hidden from view of the school. He finally spoke again and said it was the blue car down at the end. The stuff was in the boot. As we got closer, I noticed movement inside the car. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but no. There were shadows shifting in the back seat. 2 men. They were crouched down low, but I could see them clearly through the glass. My legs froze. My stomach dropped into my shoes. My body screamed, "Run!" The back door of the car swung open. One of the men scrambled out fast. At the same time, a man beside me, the one I thought was a teacher, grabbed my arm. His grip was like iron. He was tall, broad, easily twice my size. In that moment, I thought it was over. But adrenaline is a strange thing. I don't even remember deciding to move. My body just reacted. I yanked with everything in me, ripping my arm free, and bolted. Behind me, I heard them. Multiple sets of heavy footsteps pounding the pavement. They were chasing me. The bushes cleared, and the foyer came into sight. I aimed straight for the glass doors, praying they'd open fast enough. The sound of their footsteps got louder, closer. If those doors had taken even a second longer, I wouldn't be here writing this. They slid open, and I shot through into the foyer, skidding across the smooth floor, heart slamming in my chest. I didn't stop there. I ran straight into the small cafe attached to the library, where a woman was working behind the counter. I stammered out what happened, shaking, nearly hysterical. She called a teacher, then the police, then my parents. Later, I found out the truth. The man hadn't been a teacher at all. The lanyard he wore wasn't his. A student had dropped theirs outside the building earlier that day. He had picked it up and used it to get inside. That's why the ID was flipped backward, so no one could see the picture wasn't his. The men were caught on CCTV in the car park. All 3 were arrested and charged with attempted kidnapping. I didn't go back to school for weeks. Even now, years later, I'm still in therapy for the trauma. And I keep coming back to this thought. If I hadn't noticed those men in the back seat a second before the door opened, if I hadn't pulled free in that split second, if the doors hadn't opened in time, I wouldn't be here. That day remains the single scariest experience of my life. And every time I see someone hold the door for a stranger at school, I want to scream. Don't. You have no idea who you're letting in.